Live from across the United States, it's the Trans Narrative Podcast.
Yay!
Oh my God, I'm so glad to have everyone here. How's everyone doing?
Pretty good, all things considered, you know.
And
Yeah.
I'm always fantasy come reality.
Yes, I love it. So, Athena Primakis is here with us today. They are here. This is their first episode of season 2. Oh my God, welcome, Athena.
Hi. How have you all been? I heard last week's episode. Everything sounded great. We've got a kind of a format to work with. So we have a guest here that we brought. This is from somebody that I know locally, that I've met personally, and somebody that I think is quite admirable. And they'll be joining us later on in the season as part of, our hosts as well. We want to open up our podcast to be a wider representation. I'm a majority minority, right? I'm a subset of a majority group that is in itself minority. So the broader representation that we have, the better that the kinds of actions we need to take are demonstrated.
Well, it's so good to have everyone here today. Lucy, so glad to have you. Athena, it's so good to have you back on season 2. And we're sitting down today with Torin Reilly Bowen. And Torin was brought to us by Athena. Athena had introduced Torin to us here on the show. And we're so glad to finally get a chance to sit down with you. We've talked a few times before the show, and it was truly wonderful conversations, and I truly cherished it. And I'm really glad to have you here today. So, Torin, welcome to the Trans Narrative Podcast. Glad to have you.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Yes, thank you so much. So, Torin, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, to shorten down my story to a palatable length, I was born and raised here in Missouri. I've lived here my whole life. My mother is white and my father is indigenous. He is a disconnected indigenous man, unfortunately, due to circumstances surrounding his childhood. I was raised around my mother's very Baptist family, so grew up with a lot of religious trauma, lots of doubts, definitely very, very constricted upbringing, very restricted in what I was allowed to do, things such as that. From a young age, I knew that something was different. I just couldn't put my finger on it. I didn't have the words to describe what it was. Once I had the words, once I learned the words queer and trans, it kind of made things click more. And that was in my preteen years. But being in the family that I was in, I didn't have an avenue to explore those things. So instead, I repressed them. Especially after age 15, I had jokingly said to my mother that my life would be so much easier if I was a man. And she said, well, if you ever came out as one of those T slurs, I would kick you out of the house. So lots of years of repression, string of not good relationships, including one failed marriage that ended up being an abusive situation. I met my now husband, got comfortable, life was going good, and then 2020 hit. And it hit like a train. And there I was, stuck with nothing really to do, stuck in the house every day, having to think about these things. And finally I was like, fuck it. Went, shaved my head, put on some of my husband's clothes, looked in the mirror, and it was like, oh, that's actually me. I can actually see myself now. Had a very emotional talk with him. Going into it fully expecting to end up divorced, but that was not the case. We are still together very happily. Obviously, the summer of 2020, Black Lives Matter protests happened after the death of George Floyd. I got pulled into the activist circles in my local area and helped with organizing protests. Ended up being a very stressful, scary summer. Besides dealing with police and white supremacist groups, I also dealt with stalking And of course, as a transgender person, I didn't feel comfortable going to the cops and being like, hey, someone is stalking me. And parallel with all of this happening, my health was deteriorating. Um, Finally got health insurance again at the end of 2021, spent all of 2022 to find out, going to various doctors to find out that I have a connective tissue disorder called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Um, it will likely not get better. There are things that I can do to make life more tolerable, but it's not something that has a cure. It's just a bunch of symptom management. And for me, a good day, I can get up, walk, no issues. On a bad day, I'm in my wheelchair, wheeling around the house or in bed.
Being an activist is basically about putting your life on the line for a cause, and the more you're in a minority group, the more that's like a de facto or a necessity. And disabled people are born with their bodies on the line, and it's not necessarily even for a cause. But speaking up for that is really important, and especially within these majority minority groups, as queer representation becomes more available and more viable for everyone, we need to make sure that our spaces are safe for everyone. And Torin, would you like to speak a bit about that?
Yes, so my name's Torin, as Athena said. I am a transmasc, non-binary disabled person. I have been disabled my whole life. It's just a fact of the matter. It's nothing bad. It did take me several years to reach that mindset, though, just with my own upbringing, especially in the Bible Belt, Midwest. There's a whole lot of, we'll pray for you. Oh, it'll get better. But, that's just not a reality with my genetic conditions. Um, Activism has been a big part of my life. 2020 was a wild summer for me. That was where I really dove headfirst into activism, and it's gone from there to also from Black Lives Matter to Indigenous rights to disability rights. All of these are very important things to me. And yeah, I wanted to come on today and talk a little bit about, being disabled in the queer community and the trans community and how that's been for me. And, you know,
And there's kind of a way in which these statuses sort of stack. And we were kind of talking about how like some of the ways that we have to make safe spaces for people are about autonomy of choices and restricting people's availability of choices,
mm-hmm,
or opening up availability of choices. You provided some great resources to kind of help people who are planning and organizing spaces and things like that, to identify with, and we want to supply that in our show notes here to make sure that people who are listening know how to filter out. So, do you have any experiences you'd like to share just about what might have been something exclusive to you, or excluding of you from a space or an event?
so first off, I am an autistic person. I also have ADHD and PTSD. Along with that, I do struggle with an addictive personality. It's very par for the course being autistic and having ADHD, as well as my own genetic background. Um, it's there have been times where events have been very poorly planned, I guess, if we're just going to be really blunt and honest about it, where the capacity is not what it needs to be. So you've got people on top of people, very close, very loud. And that's something that a lot of people don't think about with accessibility is there are those who can't do loud noises, who can't tolerate, very crowded spaces. They need the ability to, you know, have space, have a quiet place to go to, that sort of thing. And with my physical disabilities, admittedly, I've only been to a couple of different Pride events because of my physical disabilities. Also, where Athena and I live is not the most friendly place.
No.
Um, so one of the Pride events that I attended. I love the organizers. They are great people. I don't think that they meant anything by it, but the location that the event was held at was not very accessible to those who use mobility aids, such as myself. I'm an ambulatory wheelchair user. I also use a rollator walker on some days. Um, and I cannot imagine even using my wheelchair at that event with where it was held because it was on uneven ground, it was on a grassy field, which is not very wheelchair friendly. It was barely walker friendly. I was definitely struggling, and I know that I was not the only one there struggling to walk through the area.
Yeah, I had actually helped several people set up tents who were elderly or disabled, various statuses like that. And being able to put myself on the line for that is great as part of being an ally. Just but making the event spaces safer in the first place
Mhm,
at an organizational level, it's an awareness that, of course, is really important. We can only make certain steps from the bottom to help accommodate people, and I will obviously want to do that as much as I can.
mhm,
But making sure that you have the option of a place to go to and a way to operate within that. We have a lot of digital spaces where that's so much more
mhm.
accessible to us, and that's becoming
Yes.
a lot easier to accommodate for. Do you have any recommendations as far as like how maybe we can hybridize events to allow more accessibility to people?
Uh, well, first of all, a big thing would be obviously for our nonverbal and non-hearing siblings, to have translators who use ASL, possibly have translators in different languages as well, if you're able to do that, just so that it's accessible for more people in that way as well. Um, for hybrid events, I wish that more events were hybrid events, to be honest. That way, people who are immunocompromised and still aren't going out with the pandemic, for people who are not able to leave their homes for whatever reason, would still be able to listen to these speakers and see what the offerings are that are there and that sort of thing. Um, Obviously, it's going to depend on the type of event that you have, but even if it's just offering online for people to be able to listen to speakers, that would be a huge step in accessibility, for, as I said, our immunocompromised siblings, people who aren't able to physically leave their home for whatever reason, be that agoraphobia, social anxiety, any of those.
Hmm. Absolutely. Part of that that we have to be more aware of is like immunocompromised people and
Mhm.
how we interact with them. We become a lot more aware with the outbreak of COVID and the ease of most people of wearing a mask and the tantrums that people put trying to get out of it. I
It
mean,
it it
it
it's
doesn't
very
seem as
sad.
fair. Yeah.
Yes, it's very sad. I've even on the more left side of things, I have seen a lot of people who are being very dismissive of our ongoing pandemic and of our immunocompromised siblings who are trying to spread awareness and be like, "Hey, please wear masks, please social distance, please have a little care for others who are not as privileged or who are not, don't have a working immune system because there are so many different reasons that you can be immunocompromised. Some people are just born that way. And it seems like asking the bare minimum to be like, hey, even if it's outside, can you wear a mask? If it's inside, please require masks or offer an online option.
And I may be a bit of an odd duck, but I have continued safe practices of wearing mask indoors,
Yep.
even at work, except whenever, it's around a group of people that I'm living with, etc., things like that. I
Yes.
have always just maintained that discipline. It hasn't been difficult for me, even when I'm the only person in the building of 100 people or whatever. It doesn't feel awkward to me, and I still get people come up to me and thank me. And the people who are elderly and is
Hmm.
sick or disabled, it's important to me to make sure that those voices are heard because like the way that life has already made things so difficult for them, it's got to be a part of our conversation to allow and boost those voices. It's hard for all of us to be heard in our own way.
Hmm.
But some of us like really were born and set aside and then marginalized and then resources were detracted from them. As much as we like to put opportunities into like special education programs,
Mm-hmm.
they don't always come up to like good outcomes, or the kinds
Mm-hmm.
of resources we try and put into disabilities are often squandered in their allocation.
Yes.
Yeah, there's all kinds of ways that we can criticize this, but part of it is just having the first awareness of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we want to have like a broader availability of and visibility of our uh, disabled people in our community.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of it also is there is a masking element to disability too, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And it's obviously not comfortable to necessarily communicate with people when it's not necessary. But I work with my voice, and so over the phone I communicate with people who are visually impaired, who
Mm-hmm.
don't let me know that when it's very important that like that's part of what we're doing is we're looking through some
Mm-hmm.
features or something like that. Is there anything you'd like to uh maybe help to make it an easier ask for us, or to help say something for disabled people to not feel uncomfortable in providing that information for people who need that?
I know that for myself, as a disabled person, I often will not disclose my disabled status to people. Um, Largely just because of the stigma that there is. There is still a large stigma in our society against disabled people, people with disabilities of many kinds. You still get the comments of, oh, but you're so young. Oh, but you act so normal. And people don't understand that these statements are very casually ableist. And honestly, it's a really deeply rooted issue, and I'm not entirely sure what steps we're going to need to take to unroot that. But
Yeah.
even if it's just changing your language, or changing how you treat people. If you see someone using a mobility aid in public, don't stare at them. Things such as that. It's these little things that people don't really think about if you're not part of a community, these microaggressions that have really like compacted that. And a lot of times also when you're disabled, you don't really think about having to explain things to other people because it's just your reality. And there are so many people who are able-bodied who don't have these struggles. So for me, I've surprised a lot of healthcare professionals because they always ask you, what's your pain level on a scale of 1 to 10? And I'm like, well, on my scale, I'm at a 1, but on your scale, that would be like a 4.
Have you ever
I,
seen that pain and distress levels? Add
yes,
add that in. Like, yeah, it's a 5, but I'm used to it. So
yes, exactly. I've had to explain that to so many people, even medical professionals, where it's like, yes, I'm in pain, but this is my normal state of being. A good day for me, I'm at a 3. A bad day on your scale. A bad day for me, I'm at an 8 or a 9 on your scale, but I still make myself do things.
Mhm.
Oh, I just straight out just say 10 every time. Because I know, like, I could be like, I'm at a 1. They'll be like, here's some Tylenol. I'm at a 10. Here's some Tylenol.
Yeah, and
Like,
that's a whole other beast. Like, obviously, we've had the opioid crisis in America that is
Yeah.
still ongoing, but part of that also is fueled by there not being easy access to true pain management, and it unfortunately has harmed people who need chronic pain medication to
Yeah.
where now they can't access those things.
The problem,
well,
I think, a lot of times is prescribing what were indicated at first as being short-term relief as being long-term prescriptive aids, where their efficacy just drops almost entirely, and so you wind up with these massive
Mhm.
amounts or different kinds of chemicals that are really just going to end your life. They are designed to be like life-ending medicines at that point,
Mhm.
because the only end to the levels of addiction that you get into is to, suffocate from it, so to speak.
Well, and it would
well,
be
that
helpful.
there's a racial element too for a lot
Mhm.
of cases. I've like when I was in a car accident and I had some hairline fractures in locations that should have made it very painful for me to walk, and it did. The uh, there was a white doctor. He basically told me I'll be okay. Gave me some what was it? Some Tylenol. And he prescribed Tylenol. I'm sweating in pain and I can't move on the bed because I was brought in via an ambulance. And like, it took a black nurse to walk by and be like, "You still look like you're in incredible amounts of pain." Like, yes, I am sweating profusely from this pain. And let me get a black doctor. And the black doctor was like, "Oh yeah, you should have had, like, looking at your X-rays, you should have had like Dilaudid or morphine."
Yep.
Prescribed it.
I'm
That's
luck I'm lucky enough to be white passing, so I don't have that struggle myself. But I have watched it with my father, who is indigenous.
yep.
Um, Doctors handle him differently, outside of society handling him differently because he is not white passing. Um, the way that they have handled his pain management and also his own stubborn ass personality, he very rarely will receive or get pain medications. It took him seeing a non-white doctor for them to finally
Yep.
prescribe him muscle relaxers for a chronic issue when he had broken his neck when he was younger and constantly gets tension headaches.
Yeah, they normally see it as like, oh, you're just seeking medicine, and it's like, well, yes,
Yeah,
that's why
but
I came to you, is because I'm in pain. Oh, no, 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 we think you're probably like addicted to it. And it's like, you have a database that spans the entirety of the United States. Like, you can
Mhm.
see I'm not in this. Please prescribe me something for my pain. Oh, nope, nope, nope. I literally had that happen where a doctor is like, well, um I would prescribe you something, but I can't because it might be seen as opioid seeking. And I'm like, I was just in a car accident. Like, I've been in a
Yep.
lot of car accidents in my life, as well as been in the jail several times in my life, and it's just the norm. They're just like, oh no, I can't get this. Whereas my white friend at my work is like, oh yeah, my knees hurt, so like I just went to the doctor and they gave me like choice between tramadol and Vicodin. And I'm like, wow, that's got to be nice.
Yes. It's honestly bullshit. I'm not even going to try and sugarcoat it. It's bullshit, and it's another one of those things that's baked into the system. Especially our BIPOC siblings in the disabled community, it's not fair the struggles that they have to go through to get the same amount of care that our white siblings get. And it's not talked about enough. And if it is talked about, then you have our white siblings, I'll use that term loosely to be nice, talking over BIPOC people who are saying, "Hey, I have this issue too, but I have not received the same amount of care that you have because of my race." And people are like, "Oh, no, that's not part of the issue." But it is part of the issue because
Yeah.
it is
well,
fundamentally part of the issue.
all of us are frustrated with the healthcare system for our own reasons, and we
Yes.
let our own struggles overwrite the struggles of others and not tune
Mm-hmm.
into it. I have trouble getting some of the healthcare that I want and in a timely fashion,
Mm-hmm.
and directing the doctor to listen to me as well, but not as much as someone else with a different skin color, not as
Yep.
much as somebody else with a different ethnicity or background. Just even sometimes your name will get you down the list
Oh
of
yeah.
your
Yes.
care providers and things like that. It's discrimination is not always, the CRT required. You don't have to have critical race theory to see people
Mm-hmm.
being actively bigoted and discriminatory in their behavior. Absolutely. So like all they're trying to do is like take away the ways in which we can examine these structural
Mm-hmm.
systems that are built up. So it's very frustrating. All of these kind of, like I say, stack in minority statuses,
Mm-hmm.
and they a lot of times will derive from the concept of autonomy, and we denied autonomy completely from the African Americans, enslaving them, and from Native Americans, pushing them through genocide, and even currently marginalizing through the reservation system, and
Mm-hmm.
preventing them from getting the kind of resources, or from using the land that was their inheritance to begin with. How do we make a better argument to move forward and to allow people those autonomies that were denied, and to show people that it is the right thing to do, to acknowledge, like, what kind of basic empathy do we have to teach,
What I
just
think
to
doing there
learn
is
that.
like pretty. So the reaction that you just given right there is way better than the typical response that a lot of people give, where it's like
Mm-hmm.
the response when you tell somebody like, "Oh wow," like for instance, in one of the shows we did, I pointed out to Caroline how much HRT my progress is, and it was immediately, "Oh, that doesn't make any sense." This response is better, the one you've just given right here, because it's not like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Because to a lot of people of color who are also in
Mhm.
the like boat, it's like, well, it doesn't make any sense, and all you're doing is reiterating that it doesn't make any sense, and it just makes me feel like, but this response, when you've just given there, like the explanation, the empathy, that one is something that to me makes more sense. It's like, oh yeah, I recognize
Yes.
that things are shitty for me as well, but like things are shitty for us both in different dimensions, going different ways. It's like another plane added to the shittiness.
It's
For
a
some,
fundamental level of trust in that
mhm,
autonomy for other people. We say like doctors don't prescribe us things because we might misuse them or abuse them or become addicted, but we're more denying those people from historically the same people we've always denied autonomy to. And
mhm,
now in like the bigger constructions of the law, they want to basically write out that part that says that we should have autonomy that's granted through the rights that were granted to the slaves. Those were all enumerated in some sense for us, rights to autonomy. So there's a big picture about like a civil rights, movement being constructed upon these rights of the individual and the right for autonomy and participation in family and groups of your choosing to. And that's the bigger part here is kind of like moving to that. When it's on a doctor and an individual level, they don't see that necessarily they're looking at this person different from
mhm.
that person that's
Mhm.
subconsciously baked in. But if they just look at the request and try and actually strip themselves out of the context of that situation and just look at it as a question of, do I trust this person with their autonomy? I think that would probably be a good answer for a lot of doctors who maybe have trouble seeing past color.
Even not just doctors, but to nurses as well, because we all know that mean girl from high school who is now a nurse, and you're just like, honey, you ain't got no business being a nurse.
Yeah.
But there, I agree with what you said that there needs to be changes made to where people view it more as an autonomy issue, and people need to look past their own personal biases. But then it's hilarious to me because the people who want to outlaw the things that would help teach against these biases are also the people who cry about masks and vaccines and bodily autonomy, but they don't want to award that to other people.
Absolutely. Yeah. It is very much an autonomy for me and not for thee. It is a bought and paid for autonomy, not one
Mhm,
guaranteed. Yeah. And it's one that is definitely going to be more and more seen as a privilege to have the right to access your body in certain ways or to
mhm,
prescribe certain chemicals. But we also have maybe, some other ways to be more conscientious of the way we use chemicals around others as well and things like that for
mhm.
people who are like sensitive to addiction and how we treat alcohol, how very common it is to have like, addictive substances in public. Missouri just
Yes,
passed medical marijuana and couple of years ago, and now they've passed recreational marijuana. How we've
yes,
got certain people who will still be allergic to that as much as a miracle drug it's been for my life. I absolutely love it. What it's done for my mood and my ability to sleep. I still have to
same.
be conscientious more of, if I'm going to be using that, I don't want to necessarily be like blowing it in people's faces. I wouldn't want
Yeah.
to like,
Yes.
force alcohol down
You know,
people's throats either.
it's funny that you mentioned that because I actually had my first experience as a disabled person. It's actually been I live in a lower money bracket. You know, I'm not able to work as much as the normal person is able to. Throw on the fact that I have two children. Childcare is outrageously expensive. I was not able to get myself a medical card whenever it became available in Missouri because of the price, and also the wait lists are horrendous. So now that recreational is available, I'm able to buy my medicine without having to go through all of that rigmarole. And
Mhm.
I had a very terrible experience at the dispensary that I would go to because
Mm.
of that. And long story short, someone who had a medical card decided that he was better than everybody else who was in line to buy recreational that day, and he was very rude and said explicits at us and called me a fucking bitch and misgendered me repeatedly, and he was permanently banned from the store.
All right, well, that's progress of its own kind, I guess. Excluding people
But
who are toxic from their space.
as you said, there are people who avoid substances. My father was an alcoholic from age 15 to age 30. So I myself avoid alcohol consumption. I'm not against it if other people want to do it, but I ask that they respect my boundaries. I'm not a big fan of all of the pride events that are focused around partying and drinking, and I just feel like there's space for us to be a little more conscientious. I'm not saying do away with it completely, but there should be like conscientious effort made to be like, hey, we are sober friendly. No one's going to pressure you to drink. Or, hey, there's a cutoff of like 1 or 2 drinks at this event, so we're not getting anybody absolutely sloshed and acting a fool.
Well, a lot of it is that it's sometimes the only way to provide a safe space is to monetize it somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really unfortunate, like just an extension of our capitalist system. If you want to have a safe space for a marginalized group of people, you have to make it's a bar venue. The bar
Yes.
will protect you and house you, but you have to have like a true drink minimum, these kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
And queer people don't have the church. They don't have that here. They might have a Unitarian Universalist church to like rent out if they're
Mm-hmm.
lucky enough in their small town, but they don't have a safe space to gather and be together
Mm-hmm.
without an expectation of being over 21. There's hopefully going to be, a space in which we move into where it's just going to be accepted that we don't have to have safe or protected spaces, but that's going to take a long time in these backwoods places.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I think go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say out here, one of the good things is we actually have gay cafes.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be like a speakeasy back in the yonder, so like there's actually like hidden compartments that you can access through once you're
Mm-hmm.
in. But because it's become so ubiquitous to have like a gay bar or a queer bar, they're like, well, we don't. Some of us don't want alcohol, so we've actually like they did like a crowdfunding to get a whole bunch of money together to make these gay cafes, and it's like
Yeah.
a safe place as well as they still have like to some people it's weird that they have a measure of protection, but it's like
Mm-hmm.
in this day and age you kind of need it, and it does give that, and that's one of the reasons why I like the bigger cities, which definitely not saying that, oh, if you want protection go to a big city, like that
Mm-hmm.
never be the fucking case ever.
Yes.
um you should be able to be protected wherever you go. But that's one of the reasons why I dread, like my work was asking me like, hey, do you want to go out to Arizona and manage the site there, and it's like, no. I know you see that as an upgrade where I get a big pay raise, but like my level of safety would drop drastically. Um,
Yes.
Safe places out there are alcohol related, and as somebody who no longer drinks, it's like that's not for me.
Yep. I understand that completely. And as you said, we should be safe wherever we live. Oftentimes we hear the argument of, well, just leave the area, go move to a more liberal area.
But
That's
how?
not an option for all of us.
Not everybody has the
That
money to do that. Like you can just
especially our disabled siblings.
yeah. Like that's one of the things that I didn't understand the response to like Katrina. Like when Hurricane Katrina went through, a lot of people were like, well, why didn't they just move? You can't. It's the same thing. Like you can't
Mm-hmm.
uproot everything. One, your employment is over there. Two, your history is over there. Three,
Mm-hmm.
the cost. Like moving alone, you need to have several like an apartment anywhere. It's gonna take deposits, first, last month rents in some instances. Like moving from say Louisiana, where your cost of living is way lower than say somewhere like, oh, what was it, Seattle, where it's a requirement by law that you have X amount of money. Like their
Yep.
deposits are normally 5 grand. Like somebody from Louisiana is not going to have 5 grand to move to there. Like
And that's
all
not
along
even
like
that's not
that.
even getting into the fact that even moving to areas like that, I have friends who are trans feminine who live in Seattle and they still get harassed.
Yeah, yeah. I live in California,
Just
and I
last night, one of
like
my black trans femme friends was harassed by police in Seattle. It is not a guaranteed safety. There are fundamental issues that we need to address, not only as the queer community, but as society, that what is inherently safe for one person is not safe for another person.
Oh yeah, like people like when I post the happenings, like literally my last, I think it was either last week or 2 weeks ago, somebody knifed my car. Like I posted pictures of it on Facebook. They took a knife to my car. Completely, they did over 3,000 worth of damage, right? And they told my roommate it's because the tranny dresses provocatively. And like I know this person. This person was a
Ugh.
neighbor, a religious, very religious, devout Christian. And every time I'd see them, the most I would say is the salutation, like hello or good morning, because I recognize that they weren't, about this life. So I would go out of my way to avoid them. But even me avoiding them still left apparently an impact to the point to where that same day, this person went back to my car to deflate my tires and I had to break their arm.
Oh, that's
Yeah, I beat
Absolutely
ass. And then literally
asinine.
the next day, while getting I went my roommate drinks and I'm okay with buying her alcohol. I bought some soda for myself because I don't drink and some whiskey for her. And while in the line, I had somebody try to sing to me, "Dude looks like a lady." And I'm like, "Oh, daddy, I love it when you serenade me." Girlfriend, and he got very embarrassed and his girlfriend started laughing and he got upset, and it's like, "Daddy, you don't want this attention, and why are you singing to me?" Oh,
Well, it's
like,
like my husband and I'm married to a cisgendered man. We're both queer. Um, we have been called the F slur several times in public when we're together, even whenever I'm not dressed particularly masculine, just because if you're not looking at me from the front, you're not gonna expect tits, but uh, but it's we were just walking one day in our local area and I hear some probably hillbilly motherfucker pop up and go, "Oh, look at them faggots." And I'm like, "Bro, I'm just living my life. Why
yeah,
is my life your business?"
well, and like that's why I recognize, like for me, since I do have this like physique still,
Mhm.
I do have disabilities, but they're not of the physical realm. So, or at least not apparent from my physicality. So, whenever somebody like says something or does something or gets confrontational, to me, it's hard for me not to like respond in equal like measure to whatever they're coming at. Like if you come at
Oh
me with
yeah.
a level of energy, I will match that energy. I never try to exceed it because at that point it's just me, breaking some random person's arm. Um, but yeah, like I get that too. Like people will literally, you'll just be existing in a space, not minding, like just minding your own business, not harming anyone else, not interfering with anyone else, and it happens. And it's weird, especially for I'd imagine for your case, because I have some trans mass friends who, when they're with their husband, they'll be told like, "Oh." They'll get called faggot, they'll get called gay, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Then immediately afterwards they'll be like, well, you're not a man, and it's like, but you just
Which way do you want it? Which way do you want it?
yeah, it gets crazy. Well, it just gets so out there that you're just like, wait, you just they're not a man, but they're also a faggot. Okay, all right. Do you want me to pop him in the mouth? Because I know you're very timid and you're non-confrontational, but I got they get to these mics. I got a backup mic right here.
Well, even like back in 2020, I helped organize protests for Black Lives Matter. There's one of the protests I was at, which I was doing more of like a parenting role because the main organizers, I was just helping out, were teenagers and they were getting harassed by the counter protesters. And I was like stepping into things. And this lady whips at me and she's like, "Go back to wherever you're from." And I'm like, "Lady, my ancestors are from here. Are yours?"
That's my favorite. Go back to where you came from. Bitch, my ancestors didn't get to choose. Y'all brought us on a boat. We were like, wow, these savannas are fucking fantastic. And your people were like,
Well,
huh,
and
they do really
another
well in the sun.
another time, it's really sad that we all have so many harassment stories, but as an example, as a disabled person of being harassed, I was having a really bad pain day, and two of my partners, I have three partners, two of my partners decided to take me out to the local mall. Athena knows which one it is. And we took my wheelchair because I wasn't feeling up for walking, so they were pushing me. And some random person starts yelling, "Why are you in a wheelchair? Why do you need a wheelchair? What is the purpose of you being in a wheelchair?" And
Like,
making a big deal about it. And I had to stop one of my partners because she's pregnant. And I'm like, no, don't go get in a fight right now. It's not worth it. Let's just walk away.
why am I in a wheelchair? Why is it your fucking business? Like, why the fuck are you
Exactly.
in a fucking wheelchair? Shove off, bitch. Shove
So
off.
you guys are sitting here like trading back stories, of like, having like active discrimination. And I've had like a handful of like incidents from my youth, generally like of, being called the F slur or this or that. But nothing really recently. And like in like, oh, my mid 20s, I was really struggling to recover from Christianity, and I'd found myself in a libertarian mindset, and I decided to do steampunk paintings of airsoft guns. So I had like a an airsoft gun, and I carried it like into a hotel, like open carry. Yeah, and I was completely unaware. I mean, I grew up pretty rural, and like gun culture
Oh my
for me
goodness.
was not very not really a very high restrictive or high barrier, but like,
Hmm.
yeah, I could at the age of like 26, just like a punk, walk around in public in a major city and feel like nothing was wrong being strapped like that. Like, that's some privilege I didn't even know how to check. So yeah, I can grow as a person. I can say that much. I
That's
have
Yeah.
grown
to me.
as a person.
That like the scariest thing to me wasn't the fact that like the first thing that clicked to me wasn't the fact that like, oh, imagine the people around you. It was, what are you gonna do when the cops show up? Like, they're gonna shoot you. And then that's when it clicked for me, like, oh no,
Yep.
they
No, no, they won't.
I was
No,
like,
they won't.
how are you gonna get, like, aren't you scared of getting shot? Like, if I like,
Well,
aren't
we had an incident in our area recently. Well, it was last year, Athena. I don't know if you'll recall it. Last year, it was within the last couple of years. Someone open carried an actual AR rifle at a local Walmart neighborhood market.
Yeah.
And the cops did nothing but like calmly speak to him. And I was like, that is not what would happen if that was a person of color. That is not what would happen if that was an openly presenting like trans person.
yeah.
That is
We
not what would happen.
Well, like John Crawford, when he got shot in that Walmart, it was an
Mhm.
open carry state, and he had a toy gun with a red tip on it,
Yep.
and they shot him. And like, to me, it was crazy that these officers didn't get charged solely because like this is an open carry state.
Yep.
But again, that's when it clicked for me, like, oh, I bet this person is black. And that's when they came out and they showed the picture of John Crawford, I was like, oh yeah, yeah, that's why. Yeah,
Yep.
it's happened so many times where like, if you're black, you know that certain rules just aren't for you. And that's why, like, when the left talks about these gun control issues, and they're like, oh, guns should be illegal outright, blah blah blah, whatever. I know what happens when that's the case as a black person.
Mm-hmm.
Like, one time somebody's dog bit me in a park, and I ended up kicking their dog because it was attacking my dog, and I got in the way. I lifted my dog up and it bit me. So, like, it's one of the people called the cops. When the cops get there, this person just straight out says, like, whoa, well, this person said they were going to shoot my dog. Instead of giving them like a fine for their dog being off leash, instead of arresting them for the assault by their animal, they then basically, like, they let that person go, and then they search my person for this gun while I'm bleeding. And like, to my roommate, she couldn't, well, at the time she was my wife, she didn't understand what was going on. She's like, obviously a crime has been committed and you are bleeding on them. I don't understand why the thought of you
Mm-hmm.
having a gun is more important than this person's assault. Like, this doesn't make any sense to me. And then she finally got to witness it when she was walking the dog in one of my hoodies. And like, as a black person, we have a lot of hoodies, some of which get us like cast a certain ways. And she just had like multiple police cars roll up on her, and as she's panicking, they're like, oh, oh, like they took the hoodie off, saw who she was, and she's from Japan, didn't know what was going on, doesn't speak any English at the time, and was just like, and then they just all got in their cars and left. Like, gun
Mm-hmm.
control in America is, it sounds like a good idea on paper, but like, I just don't see it being good for Black folk because we are going to get still
No.
profiled for it.
Well, and personally, I will not own a firearm because of my mental health, but I also personally stand by the fact that you have to be able to defend yourself. And especially with the climate that we're living in now as marginalized people across the board, we have to have that available to us.
Oh yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I typically refuse to carry firearms for my own mental health as well. I
Mhm.
have at that point, and now it's a necessity because
Yes.
my car got knifed. I typically carry pepper spray, a taser, a stun gun. I have multiple knives hidden on my person and in my
Mhm.
vehicle, or within the legal length, which is only a few inches. Like, I'm not going to carry all of that stuff anymore just to keep myself safe. Since I now have a clearance, I'm capable of getting a CCW in
Mhm.
California, and I'm like, yeah, like that's just going to be the default now. Is like I have my clearance. I'm applying for a CCW in California. The implication is, oh, I'll be handling um, classified documents, and they'll give it to you if you have that. But not everyone has that privilege. Like,
Mhm.
coming from a place of privilege at this point, where it's like not everybody has a job that will give them a clearance, and not every clearance holder will be able to get that CCW. I'll just be one of those except people who can, and
Mhm.
I'm not even concerned as much about the documentation, but the safety of my community. Like, you see
Yep.
these things going on all the time. I know I won't be able to go into, like, say, a bar with it, but I will be one of those gay cafes is next to a bar, and that's typically where I go whenever my friends go drinking. Now is like,
Mhm.
I'm going to that bar essentially once I get this, or not bar, cafe, because I'll you have to, exist within the law, but in these instances, like, you never know.
Well, and it's so sad that we even have to worry about just literally existing and living our fucking lives. But these are conversations that we're having to have. And, you know, being trans, being people of color, being disabled, all of these things put us at higher risks, especially for brutality from certain parties.
Even
uh,
for the ones who are supposed to protect us.
yes, it it's it's always been funny to me because friends always ask me, "Well, why are you so afraid of the cops?" And I'm like, "Because I'm white passing, but I've watched the cops be shitty to my father."
Mm-hmm. That's traumatic. It leaves an impression on you. Like, I remember even as a kid, when I finally got to move in with my folks, I saw it. Like, my bio dad had came back to get something, and he punched my bio mom, and my mom was like, "Well, I'm gonna just call the cops." They still arrested her. They didn't arrest him. They arrested her, and then they put, even though we were witnesses, like, oh, these kids are
Yeah.
lying because they're obviously want to be with their mom. I was like, no, punched the shit out of her, and we had to go with our bio dad because of it for that whole night. It was just a nightmare. Like,
Mhm.
I've not only have I been the recipient of just terrible, shitty cop behavior, but I've seen it on my folks.
Mhm. Well, and my father, whenever he was younger, he's older now, so his hair is faded to silver. He keeps it a lot shorter, but when he was younger, he had black hair, almost black brown eyes, darker skin, and he's 6'7". So
Mm.
anytime he was around cops or anybody, he would get dirty looks, he would get watched, and those are things that you notice as a kid that people don't like to talk about. There were multiple times where people acted weird because of the fact that I was with my dad solo.
Oh yeah, because as a white passing person, they automatically assume
It's like,
that.
whose goddamn white baby is this?
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly. I've seen this. I've seen this where, like, a black person will literally be with, like, an adopt, like, one of my workers or not my workers, one of my coworkers has an adopted child, and they're the same color as my mom. They're very dark black,
Mm-hmm.
and their child is very, white.
Yeah.
And the questions they got when they brought, it was like, bring your kid to work day, was like, oh, are you escorting this kid to like their parents? Like, where's their parents? And they're like, I'm the parent. This
But
is
then
my child.
and then on the flip side of that, whenever I would be with my very white mother, people would be like, "You guys don't look alike at all."
Oh, it's like there's another person in this equation whose genetics I might match.
And then people would meet my father and they'd be like, "Oh." And literally that tone of voice, "Oh, I get it now."
Oh.
But, oh, you're a bigot. You just don't get it yet.
It's like excuse me. Mm,
You're saying?
sorry. I was gonna say, like, there's a lot of like just um like insulated white culture around here.
Mhm.
I don't know exactly how to express it better, but if you go like church to church and there's no black people, no black people, no black people, and you go school to school in the rural districts and there's no black people, no black people, no black people. My parents would tell me, or they've told me that there are various parts of me that have different kinds of minority status, and it's true. And part of it was like I might have some kind of native heritage, but the fact of it is I only ever got any kind of respect for native culture out of public schooling, so I can't really call that any kind of heritage of mine.
Well, and see, going into all of that, little trauma, little background trauma of Torin's family. My great grandfather was the last official member of the Arikara in my family. When the residential schools started becoming a problem, he chose to take his children and run.
Yeah.
And they changed their name, they moved to Tennessee. My father's parents then passed away when he was very young, and he was adopted by a white Southern family. So all of his records have been changed. Our family name is lost. There's no way for us to reconnect. And my father also has his own trauma related to that. Part of it stemming from he did get to maintain a relationship with his grandfather, thankfully. But reconnection, unfortunately, is not an option for us, especially because my father is not willing to go back and dig through all of that, which is his own trauma, which is understandable growing up as a non-white child in a white Southern family that had KKK members in it.
Yeah.
I
So, go
sorry.
ahead.
No, please continue.
So, it's this delicate balance, especially for me in many of the circles that I am, because I am pagan. I'm Loki and pagan. Um, seeing cultural appropriation versus appreciation. And it also stings a little sometimes because there's the old joke of, oh, my so and so grandmother was a Cherokee princess or whatever that is. And it's just like, if you look back a lot of times, first of all, that wasn't an actual thing. Second of all, a lot of times for young indigenous women, they were stolen from their families and forcibly married. For
Yes.
some of us, our families made the choice to run and try to assimilate versus being eradicated through the residential schools, because we all know the tragedy of those and all of the children who have been lost, who will never get to go home. Some of them have gotten to go home now, but it's it's very painful, and it's painful for me now watching my own children go through the public school system to see how whitewashed that history
Oh yeah.
is.
And
They
it
don't even
really,
talk about like Pratt or what happened with those boarding schools or
Yep.
anything. They don't talk about the whole mindset that these colonizing people had of what was it exactly? I believe it was save the man, kill the
the
native.
savage, I think, is
Save
the
the
That was
word.
child,
it. Yeah.
save the child, kill the savage.
But
Yep.
like, just to kind of like try and like approach it like from where I'm at, it doesn't matter to me like the genetics of that. If that was a reality of that
Mhm.
frontier kind of world, maybe there was some kind of, agreement that they could come to, and maybe it wasn't oppressive for what they agreed to then, but it definitely has been whitewashed out to where I have no
Mhm.
appreciation. That has been a suppressed
Oh,
culture
yeah.
and has been overtaken. And yeah, therefore, that is just as genocidal, that sort of intermarrying and then overriding of the history like that.
Mhm.
Well,
There,
it even happens today because, like, when people think of the Wounded Knee incident, they solely think of that one, uh, like, a war, not World War II, Civil War era time and during the founding, and it's like, no, there was another incident that happened that had the same name that was very recent, like the Bureau of, I believe it's called the Bureau of Indian Affairs, has
Mhm.
been in the past incredibly detrimental to the natives of the states. Like, not always in a good thing. Sometimes they've done good stuff, but they've done some pretty terrible things to basically to the history for the native people,
And
and it's still
that's not even getting into blood quantum and everything
yeah.
like that.
People forget that American football sure came up with the idea of keeping the men folk ready for war. That's why it's so war-esque. But those boarding schools used that in order to that's one of the reasons like colleges had have football teams was because of what the boarding schools were doing to the natives. Like,
Mhm.
it was not, this isn't even like something that's like ancient history. This is something that is very recent still. Like, it's not something that happened way back in the yonder. It's something that happened just a couple generations ago. Same with like how people think that whenever they see the civil rights era stuff, that was like, oh, that was like over 100 years ago. No, these are things that happened within the lifetimes of like grandparents and great grandparents that a lot of let's just call it for what it is, racist white folk are whitewashing the fuck out of. Like, oh yeah, this didn't happen like this happened like this. And it's like, this happened recent. This isn't something that happened during the founding of our supposed great country. This is stuff that's literally happened in the 1900s.
And later. Yeah.
Yeah, and later. Like, this shit has been going on for
My
a while. Like, it's
yeah.
pretty
My
pretty
mother's still
shitty.
alive. And she's 91 years old, and there was a lot she escaped in the 60s. Not the 60s, I'm sorry, the 50s, when she moved out here up to the West Coast. And her first job was at a residential school in Gallup, New Mexico. And in order for her to study at UCLA, she was able to seek transfer to Riverside, California, where we live. And that was at another residential school, which is currently operating, and it's just down the street from me. And we had recently a family gathering in December where one of the big discussions was that my father was not accurate in his depiction of our family history when my grandmother's family formed along the Trail of Tears. And that was laughed at. And the reason why it was such a funny thing to my cousins was that as my father told the story to his family, to our older relatives, that his mother's, basically his grandparents, his maternal grandparents, were had conceived his mother along the Trail of Tears in an igloo while the family was being transferred to Oklahoma, or no, I'm sorry, to Arkansas from the Florida region. Um, they said that was totally inaccurate, and there was no way any of that ever happened. Why did it not happen? Because we all subscribe to 23andMe, and 23andMe says that we are not native. And so I'm, I don't know. I just, you want to talk about whitewashing, that 23andMe is major whitewash.
23andMe, so funny story, those websites are not allowed to actually, well, they're not supposed to tell you if you are indigenous or not. Like, it's an actual, like, federal thing where they're not
Really?
supposed to
Otherwise, you'll be
tell
able
you.
to grant status, because I have a family that is partially more represented Native from various tribes that have like funding and resources from the federal government for grants and things. They can't use that in 23andMe. You have to show it on paper. It's a bureaucracy restriction to
Mhm.
have this heritage proven. Yeah.
My father told me that had he been born in a hospital and not in a home, in a private home in Arkansas in 1931 or so, that he would have had the designation as being Cherokee American, and
Mhm.
instead he's not. He was his birth certificate reads Negro. And Caroline, I don't know if you saw the picture of me and my family, my first Halloween, where it shows my father and my older brother and myself next to a jack-o'-lantern. Did you see that a few days ago? He presents he's about the same complexion as Athena, and it's, I don't know, this 23andMe thing. Thanks for explaining that. I appreciate knowing that they don't want as many people as possible to know their actual um, blood quantum or bloodline.
There's a
Yeah.
lot of factors to that sort of history and trying to determine where bloodlines come from. And those are all going to be really restricted and filtered back through European countries, wealthier countries that can have those sort of markers indicated. So any confusion about like heritage and minority groups is kind of understandable, but also people moved a lot more than you might give them credit for. So
Mhm.
while I might have had ancestors in England, they could have come in through any kinds of ports, like around the world, starting from say 1700 on. There's all kinds of movements that happen around the world, and all kinds of various relationships that are forged in spite of cultures and difficulty that are beautiful. We're all here after a long process, and the
Mhm.
fact that we are granted different privileges or restricted from certain statuses just based off of complexion of our skin. It's something that you can only from the outside, I guess, of the minority complexion status or whatever you want to call it, empathize
Yeah.
with and try and remove your own biases. There's
Mhm.
still a lot of things like subconscious biases that are ingrained in a lot of us and culturally taught. And being colorblind alone isn't enough.
Mm-mm.
Being, anti-racist is necessary in this culture, and raising your children to be anti-racist as well. Those are all great lessons that we can take together as civil rights advocates for transgender rights, disability rights, all of it together. It stacks and it's our strength through
Mhm.
that diversity and recognizing we have a wide variety of backgrounds. It's not limited to one person's experiment. We have common ground in all of these things. That's what builds our ability to structure our stories as humans together and create like stronger bonds together. That's the purpose of this podcast, is really to find a way to move forward and understand each other as humans in this place. And to build that community further, we're going to provide some resources that you provided for me here. There's
Mhm.
5 ways to become stronger allies. There's a link to advocacy in the disability rights and queer advocacy spaces specifically. Are there any other resources you might recommend people for people who are disabled, how to reach out online for other just generalized resources?
Well, obviously you can always go through the ADA, but we all know that that's a little bit of a faulty system. Um, Personally, I have found a lot of resources on all places on Twitter. There's lots of links to different Discord communities there that are big on disability rights. There's a lot of disability advocates and activists on Twitter who are quite active. Um, those are good places to start. For non-disabled folks, obviously the resources that I provided for you are great. Um, it's really just a matter of wanting to take the time to research and educate yourself, which I know is hard to do, especially in a capitalist society. None of us have a lot of free time, but that is the biggest thing is especially if you go through like websites like the ADA website or the other websites that I provided for you, they offer a lot of links to other resources and give you options for ways to learn more. And even the little things of like if you see someone in public who's using a mobility aid, hold the door for them. Don't leave your shopping carts in the disabled parking area. Just these little subconscious things that people do that they don't think about make a huge world of difference for us as disabled people.
Absolutely. Designing a better and more accessible world is enriching to us all. We
Mhm.
are all at some point going to be disabled. Life will disable us in some way or
Yes.
another. So we have to be aware and active in making sure the world's going to be a safe place for ourselves. You know, not everyone is transgender, not everyone is native status, but we can all relate to people who find the kind of
Mhm.
day-to-day struggles difficult. And thanks for sharing your insight on that.
Each week on the Transnarrative Podcast, we want to highlight a piece of the bigger stories that impact our lives, the laws and attitudes and cultures that can help or hinder us as transgender people in the United States. The stories that cisgender people want to tell for us or about us are going to be missing in critical details. They won't help us to clear up our perspective. We want to show how we've struggled, how we are struggling, and also how we will overcome.
And I want to talk about, especially, we've already kind of touched upon it. It is in regards to the Senate Bill 357 repeal in California. Now, as you know, a lot of laws have been used to, in a roundabout way, harass trans women of color. In the same regard that they like to point out that this is for the children. In this instance, it's for morality. It's we built this law to prevent, as they called it, prostitution, and that's how it's being framed now. This is the repeal of this law is making a red light district, is what they're claiming. And the only people claiming this are the people on the right. A lot of Republican senators and whatnot are claiming that California is legalizing prostitution, or as us more aware people refer to it, sex work. But the thing that they're referring to is something that's always been there ever since FOSFA came along and prevented an online community involving sex work and more criminalized the middle person between um, somebody who is providing the service and somebody paying for it. With this new bill, what's going on is they're saying that they're seeing an increase in loitering for prostitution is its legal term. And that's not the case. All that's happening is people are still dressing the same. There's just complaints about, oh, this is indecent. I'm seeing naked people on my way to church. Like, I don't know about you, but I'm practically naked most of the time. And it's nothing to do with this bill. This bill was used to hinder trans women walking down the street. It's been used against me. It's been used against others. It was, oh, you look too pretty, you are dressed up, and you're walking in an area that is a high prostitution area. So we're going to investigate you. We need your ID. We need to know what you're doing here, where you're going. If you have money on you, we might seize that. They will literally seize your phone, laptops, computers, because they believe that you are doing some escort work just walking down the street. And with the repeal of this bill, it's making it better for people like myself to be able to walk down just normal daylight on a busy strip I'm not doing anything escort wise. I might just be going to a club, and now I'm not going to get harassed because this thing has been repealed. But as with anything that is for trans or the trans community, this has come under fire as Fox News tries to say, oh no, again, California is making a red light district. And that's not the case. You're going to see all types of just out there stuff on the news. They did some interviews about um, the level of people that they've picked up for prostitution recently. But what they won't tell you is that none of that was related. A lot of this stuff of people getting picked up for prostitution was in these sweeps that they've been doing for sex traffickers. And that's what they're also tying us back to. By repealing this law that no longer hinders trans people walking down the street, supposedly this is somehow increasing the level of sex trafficking in the area. And that's not the case. We know from the RAIN Institution that it's actually been an increase due to the FOSTA Act, due to the stuff that's been changing. They've made it to where you can no longer monetize whatever wares you're selling via the internet. And that's come to another issue. Oh, I lost my train of thought. Boop. Sorry. I took bad notes.
That's okay. We have an editor.
Yeah, that's good. Hold on, let me pull up my article. Oh, dang it. Boop, boop, boop. Yeah, there we go. That's what I was going to be linking it to. All right, to continue, the thing that I was trying to link this to is that in these sweeps and raids of the known sex traffickers and people who visit escorts, as well as the escorts, they found that a lot of these people who are being forced into it, they're not being forced into it by trans people, which is another thing that a lot of conservatives will like to say. For trans people are supposedly pedophiles, sex traffickers, degenerates, aka whatever negative connotation that you can bring, or any just scum of the earth type people. We are supposedly it. Out of all the people that were arrested, there was sheriffs, there were preachers, there were youth pastors, but none of the people who were forcing people to do sex work were trans. Now, that's not saying there isn't shitty trans people out there, but this narrative that it's just trans people doing these shitty actions and are morally reprehensible, it's just not really the case. And that's what I was getting at.
But basically, we want to talk about sex workers or the interaction of the law in this case between how it's treating spaces in which sex workers operate. Is that how we're treating it, or
Yeah,
specifically
so
just the hypocrisy about the conservatives in regard to who was actually caught in the
yes, so
dragnet?
one of the things that's going on with it is it's being used to say that because of this repeal, trans people are. Wait, turn the camera. What are you talking about?
Turn the cameras so it's horizontal.
Oh,
There we go.
like that. Okay. Yeah.
Sweet.
So one of the things that people are saying is that because we repealed this, it's led to an increase in prostitution and human trafficking. But that wasn't the case. There's actual metrics by the RAIN Institute as to what actually increases prostitution and human trafficking. The reason we repealed this law is because a lot of police officers were using it to harass trans women and mainly trans women of color, that they were claiming we were all escorts just walking down the street. And with this new law being repealed, now you have places like Fox News harping that it is the degeneracy of the left. We're making a red light district in San Francisco and all this other just nonsense. But really, the thing is when they do these like dragnets, they typically find at least one cop. In the most recent one, they found a cop, a pastor, a youth pastor, a priest, and some other people who are just more related to the right than they are the left, i.e., you don't really see a lot of left-leaning pastors and you don't really see a lot of left-leaning priests.
Well, So let's kind of maybe talk about like just how sex work is treated by the right and the left. And it's very much that, the right just as much inclined to use sex workers as anybody else.
Oh
Everybody
yeah,
pretty
well,
much equally does have that, but the right almost exclusively criticizes them from a moral high ground. But from
well,
the left, like we get like more on the liberal side, we get this kind of sympathetic, like smallest
yeah.
violin kind of stories playing. So, I don't know, like where
Oh, I'm not gonna
I
be
find myself in it, I don't find myself really wanting to purchase or partake in a sex market or anything like that. But I feel
well.
like it's a legitimate space
It
for
is,
that.
yeah, because it is like during the heyday of like Backpage, Redbook, all this other stuff that was out there, you could make like 10 grand in one night doing it. And like 10 grand a night, maybe actually working a little bit. It was worth it. But the vast majority of people who would come through are those right-leaning people, those people who are like, oh, like, oh, I don't want to be seen with you out in town, but here's the money, break my back like a lame horse. And I recognize that term is ableist. That's just literally what the guy had said. Break my back like a lame horse. And I'm like, gross.
I'm gonna have to live with that. I'm gonna have to try and ejaculate to that visual metaphor.
Yeah, like a lot of them were
Crack
right-leaning
that back
people.
like a glow stick.
Yeah, like they could have come up with anything other than these sort of weird comments, but the right doesn't know how to meme, nor does it know how to make humor. And it was like you can call them out. Like that was one of the things, is like, kind of educating them. You're more of a therapist than anything when you do that sort of line of work. But it was like, yeah, I don't like that phrasing because one, don't really like the word lame. Two, why would you want to put an animal into something that you're coming to pay sexually? Three, ew. Yeah, but yeah. So it's something that I'll harp on further, is how it's more along the lines of the left sees it as, it's a way, it's not that it's a way of life, it's just you're providing something as long as it was two consenting adults.
Well,
Because
it's kind of, I would view it as like Les Miserables, right? It's like, oh, the poor lady must go into prostitution, and it's just this pity story. Like it's really really ancient, and it's actually like also fundamental to certain religions, like early
yeah,
on in human experience, like the way that we restrict our interactions in modern life don't make a whole lot of sense, and they're very
no,
much from like a moral high ground that doesn't, I don't think, has a
exist
lot of
anymore.
substance. Yeah, I don't think it
Yeah,
really does. But I'd have to really deep dive into trying to find some kind of moral convictions around it, because like every time I go into a conversation with my wife about it, I come back thinking, well, no, she's right. We should just go ahead and make sure that people who do sex work are protected,
oh
and
yeah, no, that's a
able
big
to
thing.
unionize. Yeah.
That's a big thing that the Rain Institute talks about, is that if you really want to get cut down on human trafficking, legalization is definitely the route. Because right now, if you are a sex worker and you're trafficked into it, you can go to jail. Sure, you're the person who is uh,
The
enslaved.
target, the victim of it, and they provide very little in resources. They give like
Oh
a
yeah,
kit that's like
they give
twenty
you a
dollars worth of a
class.
toothbrush and this and that, right?
Yeah, they give you a kit. They give you a class. You basically are having to pay for this class too. And most people in sex work are doing it, not necessarily, most of them aren't doing it for the money in the sense of like, oh, it's destitute. It's more along the lines of like, oh, 10 grand as opposed to working. Like one of them was literally, one of the people I knew was a mom who worked at McDonald's during the day. And she was like, I can make minimum wage and try to support a family of four, or I can do that plus this, so I have my health care paid, but I can do this on the side and make like 10 grand in a night. It's an easy option here. Which am I going to go with?
Do I want my kids to go to college? Like those big questions that corporations are no longer answering for you. Like we if the question I think would be, if we legalize it, like how much would that detract from the actual value?
Yeah.
Because it's a very hyperinflated market.
Oh yeah, yeah. Like imagine working 15 minutes, and you can literally put out there 15 minutes, and it's $450 for a 15-minute like whatever. Like the only people I know who can do that are people with what are those degrees?
Doctorates in
yeah.
law.
Oh, my psychiatrist makes like $450 an hour. I know as an engineer I don't, but back in the day that's how people would pay their way through college. To me, it was no different than the people who stripped their way through college or did porn to their way through college. You're providing a service for people who obviously have a market for it. As long as there's consent involved and there's no children, because children cannot consent. Um, to me, as long as there's protection on stuff, and as someone who kind of knows the area, there was a lot of people testing because you're not trying to bring that home to your family.
The
Mhm.
biggest problem with prostitution, I think we will find in America at the very fundamental root, is that we can't tax it
Yeah,
easily enough.
yeah, to me that's honestly the only reason why it's probably still considered illegal, is because the only way to put a tax on it is through the bordello system that Nevada uses, where you have an establishment and it's the only legal place that you can actually sell your wares, and that's how they do it. They're like, oh, if you want to do this, you have to let the government know and fill out these forms, basically. And yeah, that's the only way they could do it, and it still has a lot of loss, because one of the reasons that people don't tell you about that being a scummy operation is a lot of the security guards would get like tokens, and those tokens are basically you're providing the service to them for free. And in a place like Nevada, since everywhere else it's kind of like illegal, um, its price is so much more inflated over there. Like the same service goes from, instead of like 450 to 1,000, it'll be like 1,000 to like $5,000. Um, and when somebody's paying with their token, their security guards paying with a token after making really terrible comments typically don't get the option to just be like, no, like that's 10 grand that's being turned down. And to me, that one's a lot less crap, or a lot more crappy, because again, consent is king, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Consent and autonomy. We
Yeah.
are already selling our bodies to capitalists on the hour, most of us.
Yeah.
So we should be able to do what we want with that. And if we are safe and healthy with it, they are our bodies. There should be no no right.
So, Torin, besides the fantastic name,
Mhm.
after hearing the stuff that we've talked about, and I obviously agree with you wholeheartedly on like a multitude of things, i.e., all of it. I just want to know, like, what are your views as to what the ideal outcome should be? Like, we obviously know that this shouldn't be an onus of the person who's disabled to explain to like able-bodied people, same as like trans people shouldn't have to explain things to cis people, but we do. Um, because honestly, it's a lot of emotional effort, and it's something that should be taught in school but isn't. So what would you say would be your ideal goal, like, to happen in the world?
Well, obviously, there's always going to be that like end game ideal of people not having to explain themselves constantly, and people just being accepting of, hey, this person has different needs than me, and that's okay. Um, Obviously, that starts with education, not only through the schools, because we know that the public school system is going to flub that one up,
Oh
but
yes.
um, it starts with education from parents. And as a parent myself, that's something that I feel strongly about, is teaching your children, hey, there are different people in the world, and all their bodies are different, and all of their lived experiences are different, and you should be kind to people because of that. Even if they're not kind to you, as long as they're not actively harming you, you should go into the world with this outlook of compassion and understanding. And if more people could do that, which I know is a struggle in this day and age, I feel like that would make life for disabled people, people of color, trans people, queer people, all these marginalized communities much better.
We have to build the future based off of our empathy for each other. And like in the Constitution, it says we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Yeah, that's all gender and all of that. But it's the fact that we hold these truths is what's important. That if we don't hold to them, that all of us are important and have an individual value, then it'll slip away. There's no truth to that in the universe unless we hold it. And speaking out our stories, letting us know each other's perspectives and not minimizing the pain and struggles we go through is vital to building that empathy.
And you'd say, so normally another question I like to ask is how one would go about achieving that in their own regard. And in this instance, it sounds like you're already doing that by teaching your children basically what you'd want to see in the world. Like you're being the change that you want to see. I know a lot of people quote that to Gandhi. I don't know if that person said that. I know Gandhi themselves was very problematic on several different regards. But you'd kind of say that that's what you're basically doing, the thing that you want to see in the world. You're teaching your children, like, hey, like, come at this with empathy and understanding.
Yes, and I also, both of my children are neurodivergent like I am. My son has ADHD and my daughter is autistic. So they themselves view the world differently and the world views them differently because of things that they cannot control. So it's been a big deal for my partners and I to teach them, hey, you're different too, but all of our differences make it a good thing. You need difference, it's the spice of life, but you can still be kind even when the world is not kind itself, because we all know that the world can be a real son of a bitch.
Yeah, I like to call it the world may be a cold and uncaring place, but that doesn't mean we can't work together to build a fucking fire and ward off that cold, because fuck the universe.
Yes, exactly. And a big part of that also is I'm raising my children with the do no harm, take no shit.
I live that motto. I'm not out to hurt you, but if you do something to hurt me, just expect a broken arm.
Yes. And obviously, even as a parent, every day is a new day of growth. I won't say that I had my shit together my whole life. I was raised by my mother's white conservative family. You can guess how that went for me. And it's a learning experience for myself every day of, oh, this isn't a perspective I thought about before. Oh, this isn't part of that perspective that I thought about before. I need to change how I think about this now. And being willing to constantly be growing and learning and changing, I think, is a big part of the mindset that needs to happen for people. It's okay to be wrong. Just don't be a dickhead about it.
Yeah, like there's nothing wrong with changing your mind, especially after you've learned more. Um, well, and you've kind of answered my last question that I typically like to ask and relate towards the person themselves, such as the would you be okay with essentially the fruits of your labor, kind of coming to fruition after you've passed away? Like, we do all these things, but we might not see, them come to fruition until we're, well, long and buried. Like in this instance, you're already doing that. But in the event that it doesn't go, as planned, how would you feel about that?
It's a really good question. I it would be painful, would be a good word for it. I won't say disappointing because that's not exactly right. Painful is a better word. Like, to spend my time trying to make a difference and raising my children to be open-minded individuals, raising them to be caring and compassionate, even when the world isn't, and, spending so much time even working on myself to see that nothing has changed, it would be a painful experience for me, honestly.
There's been a lot of like history that is kind of like that, though, like just movements that have come to a small uprising and then been kind of turned under because of historical realities or whatever.
Mhm.
In some way, I feel like we're living in the start of a post-scarcity society, but also at the start of a real scarcity society. If
Mhm.
we can, like, get to a Star Trek world, then it won't be a problem to acknowledge and recognize and integrate with people with disabilities. But the more we limit our ability to have a sustainable world, the more cruel and brutal it's going to become, like by its own nature. So being conscious of the ways in which we're expending our resources on the least capable now, it will always come down to affecting us as individuals. Will always at one point be the least capable individual in a society. What we do now for those people is what forges our reality for our children, and demonstrating that empathy as a virtue, as a value, as something to be replicated and endorsed. That's my dream. And if we don't see changes in the legislation, we do see changes in the family and friends and people around us. I've seen that over time, and it's not universal. There are always gaps, and there will always be children who are ignorant and people who are foolish. And but time does allow us as individuals to grow and see maybe some of the bigger frames in which discrimination or bias or mistreatment, where those came from. And it usually is like some other form of mistreatment back in the day. So it's just abuse begets abuse, and empathy and understanding hopefully hopefully begets empathy and understanding.
Yes.
Torin, I guess another good question to ask is, did you ever play Torin on World of Warcraft? That's I mean, come on now, you had to play Torin.
I actually have never played World of Warcraft. So the story behind
joke with your name.
I know. The story behind my name is there was someone that I went to high school with who I absolutely hated, but he was everything that I wanted to be as a person, as a little trans egg. He was like super confident, good at everything, and I was like, damn, why can't that be me? And I used his name for characters in D&D and video games. And finally, whenever my egg cracked, it took me a while to settle on a name. I was like, huh, that's the name.
A lot
Did
of I think
you
this experience is a norm for a lot of trans people playing D&D or a video game with the chosen name they're going to have later and the gender that they really identify with, and the next thing you know, they're like, oh my god, my subconscious has been talking to me this whole time.
Yep, that was definitely the case for me. Dragon Age Inquisition was a big game for that for me, especially as someone who generally prefers men. There was a particular romance that really spoke to me, and he was a gay man, so you had to play a man, and it ended up being one of my favorite storylines in any video game. It's very sweet, and there's some very bittersweet moments about his family's handling of him being gay and things like that, and it just really resonated with me.
next week on Video Games Are Turning Your Children Gay?
Anybody who's played New Vegas, you know they're trans. Like, if you played New Vegas and you're not trans, it's not that you're not trans. It's just that you haven't figured it out yet.
If you're not trans, then you're just H bomber guy, and you're too busy making video essays to figure out your own gender. So
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if in the future H bomber guy was like, you know what, I'm H bomber woman. Like,
gal, H bomber gal.
To Philosophy Tube, it happened to ContraPoints, it happened to Hannah and Jake. Like, I'm telling.
We'll get Vosh eventually.
Oh,
like,
it was Bosch already came out, you know, a bottom. No, I think Bosch is a switch. If I remember correctly, they're bi switch. But it would not surprise me if Bosch came out and was like, oh. I mean, I'm also waiting.
I've been fooling you all along. I am
AFAB. I've been fooling you all along. This incredibly sexy voice of mine is actually all due to the testosterone I've been injecting directly into my veins. I'm like, but those are the end of my questions. I apologize.
Right.
I hope it wasn't too crazy for you.
No, you're fine.
That last one I know is hard hitting.
What would you like to see for yourself and the community at large in the next 5 to 10 years?
In the next 5 to 10 years, I'd like to see a little more conscientiousness towards our actions, what is said, general language. There's still a lot of ableist language that is used. I'd like to see more thought put into accessibility for Pride events. I'd like to see more opportunities for our immunocompromised siblings. I'd like to see us get some goddamn peace, to be honest. Because I don't know about anyone else, but with as many different fights as I have just to be able to exist, I'm very tired, and I wish that we could all get some rest and respite and just some peace and be able to live our lives to our fullest and our happiest. That's probably asking a lot, but that's my greatest hope, is just for people to be able to exist and not deal with hatred and not deal with being scapegoats for a bigoted agenda.
Speaking of conscientious, when we go out into the world, what would you like those that don't have disabilities, what would you like them to consider as they go about their everyday life and don't deal with the challenges that you and others, millions of others, deal with every day?
Honestly, I wish that more people would consider the fact that at some point in their lives, they too will be disabled. Athena touched on it earlier, and it's honestly accurate. It's really just a matter of time. As our bodies get older, they are going to wear down, break down. It's just a fact. So just because someone is younger, why be rude to them because they're using a mobility aid? Why give people dirty looks in the store because they're using one of those carts? Just be a little more kind, which I know is asking a lot also, but I wish that people would just be a little more kind, honestly, and also that they would consider that it's not easy being disabled, and you notice the looks, you notice the whispers, and that weighs really heavily on you. And, people make elderly jokes and all that all the time, and it's not much different being disabled at a young age. You get the jokes, you get the comments, you get the snarky assholes, and just everybody is going to end up there at some point. You don't know when. You could have a freak accident happen, and then all of a sudden, bam, you're disabled. You could have, out of nowhere, an autoimmune disorder pop up. It's not uncommon for people as they age to have these things pop up. And it can happen to anyone at any age. So just be kind, be considerate, and just be kind. It's hard to ask, and it's a lot to ask, I know, especially on shitty days. We've all got shit going on, but being polite, holding the door for someone, using a walker, offering to help someone reach something from a shelf, just those little things like that can make someone's day so much better.
Messenger, because that's where I send those big long emails that explains
Especially
everything.
at the 6 in the morning, whenever some turf accidentally like pisses you off.
Well, that
Good
happens
old
too.
turfs.
Oh, and speaking of such, we are an attention-seeking podcast. What do
Yes,
you know?
attention-seeking podcasts are brought to you by Your Ad Here. Please place an advertisement with us because we really don't want to seek attention anymore. We want money. Money's better
Yes.
than attention. Give us money.
Exactly. Speaking of
How
which, you
about
can email at transnarrativepodcast@gmail.com. That's how you can do it. And then but it's been great to have everyone here. Please find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Google, and on Facebook, and anchor.fm/transnarrative. But this isn't going to be in the podcast. I'm just saying.
Yeah, it's just now a reflex. It's
All right.
Pavlovian. I rang the bell and you salivated for me.
Google,
Yes.
Google Wallet,
All right.
Pay, Talk Pay.
Bye, everybody.
All right. All right. It's been fun. Bye. Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.